And with that, let's get right to our headliners. David Axelrod from the Obama campaign and the chair of the Republican National Committee, Reince Priebus. And Chairman Priebus, let me begin with you. Good morning. Thanks for coming to us from Wisconsin.
Hey,
President
good morning,
Obama,
Joe.
You saw him there yesterday. Voters are going to be hearing about that leaked video every single day.
Well, I mean, listen, I think Governor Romney's been pretty clear. It probably wasn't the best said moment in the campaign, and probably not the best week in the campaign. But I will say that I think we can look back at last week as a campaign in a couple months and say this was the defining week in both campaigns, where I think both campaigns are crystallizing around a central theme, which is going to be what kind of future do we want for our kids and grandkids? What type of America do we want for this country? Do we want the cradle-to-grave, life of Julia, Obamacare will take care of you from preschool to death America? Or do we want sort of a return to, you know, opportunity, liberty, freedom, you know, the type of America where when I grew up here in Racine and Kenosha, Wisconsin, that, you know, my dad would point to a house as a union electrician, a nice house, and say, you know what, guy, if you go to school and you work hard, you're going to live in that house.
Let me interrupt you right there. You're saying you like the choice that was presented to voters last week?
No, here's what I would say. I think that it's an important question, and I think that the question presented to this country and the question that will be presented isn't so much, which we can talk about whether people are better off today than they were 4 years ago, and clearly we're not. But I think the more important question is what type of America and whether or not our kids are going to be better off 4, 10, and 20 years from today. And the policies that Barack Obama are putting in place, where we have seen just an enormous growth in people that are dependent on the government. I mean, it's just a fact. I don't think that's the type of America we want for our kids and grandkids. And I think that is an important question, and that is a question that should be presented to the American people. And Barack Obama's made everything worse, George.
Well, you say the question is, are Mitt Romney and his campaign up to the task of defeating him? And you know there were a chorus of Republican critics out this week as well, and none more forceful than Peggy Noonan in the Wall Street Journal. Here's what she wrote earlier in the week. She said, "It's time to admit that the Romney campaign is an incompetent one. It's not big, it's not brave, it's not thoughtfully tackling great issues. It's always been too small for the moment, and intervention is in order. Mitt, this isn't working." You know, she went on to amend that in her Saturday column, said she was just being polite, calling the Romney campaign incompetent, said instead it's a rolling calamity. Now, I know that Governor Romney says his campaign doesn't need a turnaround, but is he in denial?
No, I don't think so, George. And quite frankly, first of all, I think Peggy Noonan's really smart, and I read both of those columns. I think that where we're at as a movement and as Republicans and conservatives and people that are really worried about the growth of government in this country and what that means for our future, I respect and I admire people that get very concerned, and even if they're upset about, you know, something that happens in a campaign, or if the week needs to be better like last week, because I think that this is a different kind of campaign, George. I mean, I promise you on my life, I'm not sitting here talking to you because I'm worried about the future of the Republican Party, and I can guarantee you that all the people that we're talking to here in Wisconsin aren't either. We're worried about the future of this country, and that's why, you know, I think that the leeway given on our side of the aisle is very small to the likes of Peggy Noonan and other writers that say, hey, listen, guys, we need to be ahead. We need to be pounding away. I agree with that, and I think we are. I think that we had a good week last week, I think in retrospect, in that we were able to frame up the debate last week in the sense of what future do we want and do you want out there for your kids and grandkids? And clearly things are not going well in this country, George.
Even your governor, though, Chairman Priebus, Scott Walker, Republican governor of Wisconsin, has said that Governor Romney has to be much more bold and specific in laying out this case. And he wants to unleash Paul Ryan, the congressman from Wisconsin as well, thinks that the whole Romney campaign has to be more in the Ryan playbook, has to be putting out more bold and specific ideas. Is he right?
Well, I don't think he quite said it that way, George. I know he said that months ago. He's not right as we sit here today. I mean, the fact of the matter is...
He used the words bold and specific this week.
Listen, I'll tell you about specifics. First of all, Mitt Romney talks about all the time about reducing GDP spending from 25 cents on the dollar down to 20, reducing small business taxes from 35 to 25, reducing income taxes across the board by 20%. I mean, for crying out loud, we've got Paul Ryan on the ticket. There can't be anything more specific than a budget that we passed to get a hold of the 10-year debt window, the deficits that are out of control that the president promised that he would fix. As far as specifics go, we're the only ones talking about how to save Medicare. The president's the one that raided Medicare by $700 billion. I mean, we've got specifics coming out of our eyeballs, George, and so I just think that we need to keep pounding away on those specifics and keep talking about those specifics so that the American people know. Because I think that people out there, George, have made up their minds that clearly this president didn't fulfill the promises and the mission that he laid out 4 years ago. And now, over the next 46 days, we have to lay out to the American people, not just that we need to start having people in office that commit to the promises they make, but that we need to lay out the vision and lay out the specifics as we are doing, but more clearly and more consistently on a daily basis. I mean, we have to win the day. We have to win the mission on a daily basis.
A couple more quick questions. Governor Romney put out his tax return, his 2011 tax return on Friday. The Obama campaign say that Romney continues to fail the test of full disclosure. Your response?
I think it's totally bogus. I mean, they've given away over 30% of their income to charity. The Romneys are, we've mentioned that I'm in Kenosha and Racine, Wisconsin today. You know, a lot of communities have families that are extraordinarily generous. That they're the ones that show up and save the symphony. They help build the wing and the library. The Romneys have been successful, but they've also been the types of people in the community that we thank God for every day through their generosity and their kind heart. That's a narrative, George, that has to get out there. These are kind, compassionate, extraordinarily generous people. And for Barack Obama to play this small ball game when he's got a disaster overseas in the Middle East and in Northern Africa that he said he could solve, which he didn't, and now they're whistling past the graveyard on that issue. We've got a disaster in the economy in this country, and somehow this president thinks he's entitled to 4 more years. I think he should worry about intelligence briefings, getting the economy back on track, instead of debate prep and you know, interviews with you know, Pimp with a Limp and meetings with Jay-Z and Beyonce.
Finally,
I think he needs to get serious.
I want to ask you about Republican chances in the Senate. It seems like the chances the Republicans will take over the Senate far less than they were just a few months ago. Your own Senate candidate in Wisconsin, Tommy Thompson, says the Romney campaign may be holding back his own chances as well. 2 quick questions. Are you convinced, still convinced, the GOP can win in the Senate? And 2, now that it appears that Todd Akin is going to be the Senate candidate in Missouri, does he have the full backing, full and official backing of the Republican Party?
Well, I mean, the second one first. I mean, we're not going to play in Missouri with Todd Akin. I can tell you that. So it'll be yet to be seen whether he stays in or not. As far as the first question, I'm very confident we can take the Senate. I mean, I know that Tommy's going to win here in Wisconsin. He is a legend. It's like Harley Davidson, Miller Lite, Tommy Thompson. He is a brand. He's going to win. But then you go to Nebraska, North Dakota, Montana. That gives you 4. You hold Scott Brown. And then we haven't even talked about what's happening in Virginia, Ohio, Florida. I feel very good about it. And I would also keep an eye out on Hawaii and Linda Lingle out there. So we've got great opportunities. We're going to win this race because people know that we need a better future for this country. And so far, the last 4 years have been a disaster. I don't think people are hoping for 4 more years of this mess. Chairman
Priebus, thanks very much for your time this morning.
All right. Thank you, George.
The Obama campaign now. David Axelrod here with us this morning. Thanks for coming in.
Great to be here.
You heard Chairman Priebus right there last week, a defining week for the campaign, a good week for the Republican campaign.
Well, I don't know what prism he's looking through. I don't think anybody else would define it as a good week, but it was an enlightening week. The week began with Governor Romney basically slandering 47% of America, saying that they were, you know, hooked on dependency, didn't pay their taxes, and so on. And at the end of the week, we saw him manipulating his own tax returns to try and plump up his portion of taxes to 14%.
You're talking about not taking the charitable deduction.
Right. 2 months ago on your own air, he said that anybody who didn't take the deductions they were owed wasn't qualified to be president. Well, I guess he's not qualified, because that's exactly what he did last week to try and get his number up from 9 or 10% to 14%. It's fair to say that a lot of those 47% that he was slandering earlier in the week probably pay a higher percentage of their income in taxes overall than he does.
But do you really think there's any more juice left in this issue?
Well, look, I think that it is important that, I mean, we did learn some things from these tax returns in addition to the rate he paid. We understood that the guy who goes around America saying he's going to bash China, invested in the Chinese oil state oil company. The guy who says, let's believe in America, put his money in a fund that hedges against American treasuries, roots for failure of the American treasuries. So, you know, we learned some things, but he still hasn't disclosed any years before 2010. His father was the one who set the standard, 12 years. And you know why? He said, you put out 1 or 2 years, you can manipulate them to give false impressions. So the question for people is why? But George, the bigger issue isn't that he isn't being straight about his own taxes. The bigger issue is that he isn't being straight about what he's going to do to everyone else's taxes. You heard Chairman Priebus say we have specifics coming out of our eyeballs. I don't think anybody else has seen those specifics. $5 trillion tax cut Governor Romney has proposed. No specifics on how he would pay for that tax cut. $2 trillion in new defense spending. No specifics on how he would pay for that. He's either going to explode the deficit, sock it to the middle class, or both.
At the same time, the economy, as you know, still struggling. We also learned this week that unemployment rose or remained the same in 38 states last month. Huge problem for the president.
Well, look, the country's come through a difficult time, George. We know that. We've had this discussion before. We've come a long way from when we were losing 800,000 jobs a month. We've had 30 straight months of job growth, but this is an ongoing project. The question is for the country right now, is the answer to go back to trickle-down economics, a $5 trillion unpaid tax cut skewed to the wealthy, deregulation of Wall Street, the same script we played through in the last decade, or are we going to keep moving forward and doing the things we need to rebuild this economy and rebuild the middle class?
The Romney campaign going to do everything it can to remind people of what they say are Obama's failures, President Obama's failures. A new ad out this morning based on this book, looking back at the debt limit crisis last year, Bob Woodward's book. Here's the ad.
During stimulus negotiations, President Obama called his Democratic leadership team, Harry Reid, Nancy Pelosi, and as President Obama spoke, Nancy Pelosi hit the mute button, went on with their meeting, ignoring the president, not even listening to what he had to say. If he cannot lead his own party, how can he lead America?
Their point, President Obama's failed the test of leadership.
Well, first of all, Nancy Pelosi has denied that incident, but the larger point is the larger point is this, George. I read today that the Romney campaign said they're going to double down on their attacks on the president. I don't think the problem has been that they haven't attacked the president enough. It's not about them tearing down the president. They simply haven't offered ideas about how they're going to lift up the country. And until they do that, I think the American people are going to continue to reject him. The most interesting poll in the last week came from the state of Massachusetts, where Governor Romney, the state he governed just 6 years ago, is 33 points behind. You're a student of history. No one has ever won the presidency without carrying their home state. What a harsh judgment from the people who know him best.
One final question. You talk about the polls. How do you explain the fact that in the Gallup poll, it still shows a tied race after all this?
Well, look, we've always said it was going to be a close race. Structurally, the way the politics of our country are set up, we knew it was going to be a close race. We're prepared for a close race. I'm not going to get into the nuances of individual polls. Some have us much farther ahead. Some have us more narrowly ahead. But we're prepared for a close race, and we're going to work every hour of every day until November 6th, because, as Chairman Priebus said, there is a lot at stake about the kind of future we're going to have.
David Axelrod, thanks for coming in this morning.
Great to be with you.
Coming right up, our powerhouse round.